I still remember the day I first saw Ava Johnson in her high school hallway. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight streaming through the windows, and her green eyes sparkled as she laughed with her friends. My heart skipped a beat, and I knew right then that she was something special. It took me weeks to work up the courage to talk to her. When I finally did, stumbling over my words like an idiot, she just smiled and put me at ease. We clicked instantly, spending hours talking about our dreams and hopes for the future. Our first date was at the local diner. I spilled milkshake all over myself, but Ava just giggled and helped me clean up. That's when I knew I was falling hard for her. As we grew closer, our bond deepened. We'd spend weekends exploring the countryside, having picnics by the lake, or just hanging out in my garage while I tinkered with old cars. Ava always supported my passion for welding, encouraging me to pursue it as a career. After graduation, I proposed. It wasn't anything fancy, just us on the hill overlooking our town, the stars twinkling above. When Ava said yes, I felt like the luckiest man alive. We got married in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. As we exchanged vows, I promised to always support her dreams, just as she supported mine. When Ava expressed interest in studying law, I didn't hesitate. I took on extra welding jobs, working long hours to save up for her college tuition. It was tough, but seeing her excel in her studies made it all worthwhile. "You're amazing," Liam, she'd say, kissing me after acing another exam. "I couldn't do this without you." I'd just smile. Knowing that our love could conquer anything. We were building our future together, brick by brick, dream by dream. As Ava settled into her new job at Sterling Haynes, I couldn't have been prouder. She'd worked so hard for this, and I was thrilled to see her dreams coming true. But as the weeks turned into months, something began to change. It started with the late nights. At first I understood. Big cases, important clients, I got it. I'd keep dinner warm, waiting up for her. But those nights grew more frequent, and soon dinner went cold more often than not. Then came the nights out. Wednesdays and Fridays became sacred to her new work crowd. I'd watch her get dolled up, a knot forming in my stomach as she'd rush out the door with barely a goodbye. "It's just networking." "Liam," she'd say, her voice distant. "You know how important this is for my career." I'd nod, trying to ignore the growing unease. Where was the woman who used to curl up with me on the couch, laughing at bad movies, the one who'd surprise me at work with lunch, just because? Our weekends, once filled with lazy mornings and shared dreams, became a blur of her catching up on sleep or prepping for the next big case. I found myself alone more often than not, tinkering in the garage or staring at the TV without really seeing it. One Friday night, as I sat in our empty living room, the silence deafening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. The Ava I married seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I tried to talk to her about it, but she'd brush off my concerns. "You're overthinking things," she'd say, not meeting my eyes. "This is just a busy period. It'll calm down soon." But it didn't. The nights out increased, and the distance between you and us grew. I started to wonder if there was more to these outings than just networking. The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't shake it. One morning, as the aroma of fresh coffee filled our kitchen, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. Ava sat across from me, her eyes glued to her phone, probably checking work emails before she'd even taken a sip. "Ava, we need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "These late nights, the constant outings, it's too much." "Do you realize you missed our last 3 date nights?" Ava's brow furrowed. "Liam, you know how important this job is. I'm building connections, working towards partner." I get that, I interrupted, but what about us? What about our relationship? She sighed, setting down her phone. "You're overreacting. It's just a busy period." "That's what you said months ago," I countered. "Fridays used to be our night, remember? Now I can't even remember the last time we had dinner together." Ava's eyes softened slightly. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was affecting you this much." "Look, I'll try to cut back on the outings, okay? We'll spend more time together. I promise." A relief washed over me. Maybe she'd finally understood. That's all I'm asking for, Ava. I miss us. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I miss us too. I'll make it up to you, starting this Friday. No work, no outings, just us. I smiled, hope blooming in my chest. But that hope was short-lived. The following Friday, I prepared a special dinner, even bought flowers. But as the clock ticked past 8, then 9, my calls went straight to voicemail. When Avia finally stumbled in after midnight, reeking of alcohol and perfume, her promises from earlier that week felt like a cruel joke. This pattern continued. She'd make half-hearted attempts to spend time with me, only to cancel at the last minute or show up late. Her behavior hadn't changed, if anything, it had gotten worse. The late nights, the broken promises, the distance growing between us, it all added up to a gnawing suspicion in my gut. I tried to push it away, to give Ava the benefit of the doubt, but the nagging voice in my head wouldn't let up. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth, even if it would shatter my world. With trembling hands, I installed a tracker on Ava's phone while she was in the shower. The guilt ate at me, but I reasoned it was the only way to get answers. That Friday night, I sat in my truck, watching the blinking dot on my phone screen. My heart raced as I followed it to a trendy bar downtown. I parked across the street, steeling myself for what I might see. Through the large front windows, I scanned the crowded bar. My breath caught in my throat when I spotted her. Ava was perched on a bar stool, surrounded by her work colleagues, but my eyes zeroed in on the man next to her, Mark, I assumed. He was tall, dark-haired, and dressed in an expensive-looking suit. I watched, my stomach churning, as Avia leaned in close to Mark, laughing at something he said. Her hand rested on his arm, fingers trailing down to his wrist. The intimacy of the gesture felt like a punch to my gut. But what really drove the knife in was when I noticed her left hand. Her wedding ring, the symbol of our love and commitment, was conspicuously absent. The gold band I'd saved for months to buy her was nowhere to be seen. I felt like I was going to be sick. All those nights I'd waited up for her. All the times I'd swallowed my doubts and insecurities, it all came crashing down around me. The woman I loved, the one I'd supported and cherished, was right in front of me, openly flirting with another man. My heart pounded in my chest as I strode across the bar, my eyes locked on Ava and the man she was with. The closer I got, the clearer I could see her hand on his arm, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. "Well, isn't this cozy?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm as I reached their table. Ava's head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock. "Liam? I could ask you the same thing I shot back, my anger rising. But I think it's pretty clear what you're doing." The man next to her, Mark, I assumed straightened up, trying to look intimidating. "Hey buddy, why don't you back off?" I ignored him, focusing on Ava. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" Eva glanced around nervously, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Liam, please, you're making a scene." "Oh, I'm making a scene," I laughed bitterly. "That's rich coming from you. Where's your wedding ring?" "Ava." A woman at the table, Claire, I later learned stood up, her voice cold. "I think you should leave." I turned to her, my eyes blazing. "And I think you should mind your own business. This is between me and my wife." Turning back to Ava, I continued. "I've stood by you, supported you through everything. I worked extra shifts to put you through law school. And this is how you repay me." Mark stood up, puffing out his chest. "Look, man, you need to calm down," and I rounded on him. "You think it's okay to mess around with a married woman? You're pathetic." The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ava's colleagues shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their drinks. But I wasn't done. "I've been loyal to you, Ava. I've loved you, trusted you. And you threw it all away for what? Some office fling?" Ava's eyes were filled with tears now, but I felt no sympathy. "Liam, please, can we talk about this at home? Talk about what I spat, how you've been lying to me, how you've been sneaking around behind my back. No, I think your friends here should know exactly what kind of person you are." Ava slammed the front door shut when she come home, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger as she stepped inside. I stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed. The silence hung heavy between us, thicker than the secret she'd been keeping. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking the quiet. "Liam, I really am. I never meant for it to go this far." I stared at her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "What did you think would happen, Ava? You thought I wouldn't find out." My voice came out harsher than I intended. "It was a mistake, okay? I lost sight of what's important. But I want to fix this. I promised to change." She moved closer, reaching out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. She stopped going out for a while as promised, as if she thought a few weeks of good behavior would mend the cracks in our marriage. There were nights we'd sit together, silent but present. We went on date nights again, attempting to patch the gaping wound with tender moments. Yet every time she laughed or smiled, I wondered how genuine it was. Were those same smiles shared with Mark? Did she laugh like that for him too? Despite my efforts to push those thoughts aside, suspicion gnawed at me. Wednesday rolled around. She lingered at home, restless but holding her ground. By Friday, the itch to return to her old habits clawed its way back. She stood by the bedroom mirror, fixing her hair, going somewhere. I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Just a quick drink with Claire and a few colleagues." "Nothing late." I promised. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I sighed. "We've been down this road before, Ava. You said you'd change. I have changed. This is different. It's just one night." The cycle resumed from there. Her promises dissolved into the same old pattern: out on Wednesdays, out on Fridays, leaving me to wonder what happened to us. The distant aura she carried crept back in, and with it, the cold realization that maybe she would never change. Looking out the window, watching her drive off, I felt a pang of longing for the simpler days when it was just us against the world. But those days seemed like a distant memory, buried under layers of broken trust and unfulfilled promises. The house felt emptier with her absence, a stark contrast to the life and warmth we once enjoyed. Ava's words echoed in my mind, hollow and meaningless. The more things changed, the more they stayed the same, and I couldn't help but feel a nagging sense of inevitability that our love, once fierce and unwavering, had become a shadow of its former self. That evening, Ava played the perfect hostess. She transformed our dining room into a cozy, romantic space with candlelight flickering and soft jazz hums filling the air. Her blonde hair was twisted into a delicate updo, and she wore a sleek, black dress that hugged her in all the right places. I wanted to believe she'd turned a new leaf. Especially after weeks of shattered promises and empty words. Maybe, just maybe, this dinner could be a step toward mending the fractures in our marriage. "Surprise," she said, setting down a plate of my favorite dish, steak and potatoes with a side of steamed vegetables. She poured us both a generous glass of wine, the dark liquid shimmering enticingly in the dim light. I thought it was time we had a special night together. I smiled, though it felt strained. Suspicion still lurked beneath the surface, gnawing at my gut. But seeing her effort, I chose to push the darker thoughts aside. "It looks amazing." "Ava," I said, lifting my glass. "Here's to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," she echoed, clinking her glass against mine. The bottle gradually emptied, and my head started to feel heavy. My vision blurred, and words slurred as I tried to form coherent thoughts. "Ava," I mumbled, rubbing my temples. "I feel strange. I think you've had a bit too much wine." "Love." "Let's get you upstairs to rest," she said, her voice honey-sweet and soothing. I stood, the room spinning wildly around me. Ava's arm slipped around my waist as she guided me up the stairs. Each step felt like trudging through quicksand. My legs grew weak and my head lulled to one side. "Ava, what's happening?" I barely managed to get the words out before darkness swallowed my consciousness. I woke up groggy, a throbbing pain blooming at the back of my skull. Blinking against the harsh light, I struggled to get my bearings. My wrists and ankles were bound tightly, cutting into my skin. The cold metal of the chair's frame pressed uncomfortably against my back. Panic surged through me as I squirmed, testing the bonds. The sickening realization hit hard. I was tied to a chair in our bedroom. The familiar surroundings took on a sinister aura. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a drum echoing my fear. "What the hell?" I muttered, trying to shake off the dizziness. I strained against the binds, skin burning. Then I heard her, Ava's laughter, mingled with other voices. The bedroom door creaked open, and in they walked. Ava, flanked by Mark and another man I didn't recognize. Claire trailed behind them, a smirk playing on her lips. "Well, look who's awake," Claire purred, stepping forward. "Enjoying the show." Liam, fear and anger roiled in my gut. "What the fuck is this?" "Let me go," my voice cracked, betraying my rising panic. Ava moved to join them, her hand sliding down the zipper on her dress with practiced ease. I thrashed against the binds, my skin tearing against the restraints. "Stop this, Ava. You don't have to." Quiet Claire's voice cut through the room, sharp and commanding. Her hazel eyes bore into mine with ruthless determination. "You're not in control here, Liam. You never were." Tears of frustration stung my eyes. I felt like a puppet, powerless and humiliated. Every fiber of my being screamed to look away, to shut out the depravity unfolding before me. But I couldn't. The bonds held me captive, forced me to witness every twisted act as Ava lost herself in the obscene tableau. "Ava," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "Please, stop this madness." She glanced over. A flicker of something remorse, maybe crossing her face before being buried under a mask of cold detachment. "This is what you made me, Liam. Deal with it." The man I didn't recognize grabbed Ava roughly, pushing her onto the bed. Mark joined them, their bodies entwined. Claire relished in my torment, feeding off my helplessness. "Do you see now?" "Liam," Claire taunted, leaning close enough for me to smell her perfume. "You've lost. You're nothing but a spectator in your own life." Rage churned within me, fierce and unrelenting. But it was a futile fire, contained by the cold metal and cruel reality of my restraints. I had to watch, helpless as any remaining love I had for Ava disintegrated under the weight of betrayal and indignity. Hours felt like an eternity as the nightmare played out. When it was finally over, as they draped themselves in sheets and staggered out with self-satisfied smirks, I was left alone in the ruined shell of our bedroom. Empty. Defeated. Ava paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. "Consider our marriage officially over, Liam. You're free of me now." As her figure disappeared down the hallway, the silence crashed over me, overwhelming and absolute. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had just annihilated any shred of hope left in my heart. I managed to work my way out of the bindings, my wrists raw and bleeding from the effort. My mind raced, a whirlwind of anger, betrayal and fear. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. 911, "What's your emergency?" "I've been assaulted," I choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. "My wife and 2 others. They drugged me," and I couldn't finish the sentence. The dispatcher's voice was calm and reassuring as she took down my information and dispatched officers to my location. I paced the room, unable to sit still, my skin crawling with the memory of their hands on me. When the police arrived, I recounted the horrific events in as much detail as I could manage. The officers were professional, taking notes and photographing the scene. They collected evidence: the wine glasses, the rope used to tie me up, and samples from the bedsheets. "We'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement," one of the officers said. I nodded numbly, following them out to their patrol car. At the station, I sat in a small, sterile room, repeating my story to a detective. He assured me they would arrest Ava, Mark, and Claire immediately. I felt a grim satisfaction at the thought of them being hauled away in handcuffs, but my relief was short-lived. Less than 24 hours later, I received a call from the detective handling my case. "Mr. Turner, I'm sorry to inform you that Ava Johnson, Mark Evans, and Claire Peterson have been released on bail." My stomach dropped. "What? How is that possible?" the detective sighed. "Their law firm pulled some strings. They've got connections with the judge who set bail. I'm sorry, but there's not much we can do about it right now." I hung up, feeling more vulnerable than ever. The thought of Ava walking free, potentially able to come after me again, sent chills down my spine. I needed help, someone who could navigate the legal system and protect me. That's when I remembered Rachel Adams, an assistant district attorney I'd met at a community event last year. She'd seemed tough and no nonsense, exactly what I needed right now. I found her number and dialed, praying she'd remember me. Rachel Adams, speaking, her crisp voice came through the line. "Ms. Adams, this is Liam Turner. We met at the 4th of July picnic last year. I need your help." There was a pause, then recognition in her voice. "Mr. Turner, yes, I remember. What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath and launched into my story. Rachel listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement. When I finished, she spoke, her voice filled with quiet anger. "Mr. Turner, I'm so sorry this happened to you. What they did is despicable, and they absolutely should be held accountable. But they're out on bail," I said, the frustration evident in my voice. "Their firm got them released." "I don't know what to do. I understand your frustration," Rachel said. "Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for people with wealth and connections to get preferential treatment in the bail process. But that doesn't mean we can't fight back." "How?" I asked, desperate for any glimmer of hope. As she spoke, I felt some of the tension leave my body. It was a relief to have someone knowledgeable on my side. "Next," Rachel continued, "we need to build a strong case. The physical evidence collected by the police will be crucial, but we should also look into their past behavior. Have you noticed any patterns of manipulation or abuse from Ava before this incident?" I thought back to the months of lies, the broken promises, the gaslighting. "Yes," I said quietly. "There's been a lot." "Document everything you can remember," Rachel instructed. "Dates, times, specific incidents. The more detail we have, the stronger our case will be." I left Rachel's office, my mind reeling from the weight of everything I just shared. The details of that horrific night still haunted me. But there was a small comfort in knowing that someone was finally listening, finally taking action. As I stepped out onto the bustling street, a sudden wave of vulnerability washed over me. Where could I go now? The thought of returning to the house I'd once shared with Ava made my skin crawl. That's when it hit me, Alex. My old friend Alex had always been there for me through thick and thin. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. "Hey man," Alex's familiar voice came through the speaker. "What's up, Alex?" I had my voice caught in my throat. "I need a place to stay. Things have gone to shit with Ava." There was a brief pause before Alex replied, his tone laced with concern. "Say no more, buddy. Come on over. You know you're always welcome here." Relief flooded through me as I hailed a cab and gave the driver Alex's address. As we wove through the city streets, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was heading towards safety, towards people I could trust. When I arrived at Alex's place, he was already waiting at the door. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. Without a word, he pulled me into a bear hug, and I felt myself crumble a little in his embrace. "Come on in, man," he said softly, leading me inside. "Hannah's here too. We'll get you sorted out." As we enter the living room, I saw Hannah rise from the couch, her blue eyes wide with concern. She'd always been like a little sister to me, Alex's kid sister, who'd grown into a smart, kind woman. "Liam," she breathed, rushing over to give me a hug. "Are you okay? What happened?" I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "It's a long story," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. Alex disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a cold beer. He pressed it into my hand, then sat down across from me. "We've got time, buddy, whenever you're ready." So I told them everything. The affair, the confrontation at the bar, the assault. Hannah's face paled as I spoke, her hand covering her mouth in shock. Alex's jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with anger on my behalf. When I finished, silence hung heavy in the room. Then Hannah spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You're staying here, Liam, as long as you need." I looked up at her, surprised by the intensity in her eyes. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," Alex cut in. "Hannah's right. You stay here until this whole mess is sorted out." Overwhelmed by their kindness, I could only nod, feeling a lump form in my throat. As the days passed, I found myself settling into a routine at Alex and Hannah's place. Alex would head off to work in the mornings, while Hannah, who worked from home most days, would keep me company. We'd share meals, watch movies, or just sit and talk. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Hannah surprised me. We were sitting on the balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon. When she turned to me, her cheeks slightly flushed. "Liam, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to her, curious. "What is it, Hannah?" She took a deep breath, then met my gaze. I've had feelings for you for a long time. That you deserve so much better than what Ava did to you." I sat there, processing her words. Hannah had always been a constant in my life, a steady presence I could rely on. And now, looking at her in the soft glow of the setting sun, I saw her in a new light. Without thinking, I reached out and took her hand in mine. "Hannah, I don't know what to say." She squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." As I looked into her eyes, I felt something stir within me. It wasn't the passionate, all-consuming love I'd once felt for Ava. This was different. Softer, warmer, like coming home after a long, difficult journey. I woke up early the next morning, my mind racing with thoughts of what Ava and her cronies might do next. Hannah was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee and making breakfast. Her presence was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos that had become my life. "Morning," she said softly, sliding a mug of coffee across the counter to me. "How'd you sleep?" "Not great," I admitted, taking a sip. "Can't stop thinking about what might happen next." Hannah nodded, her blue eyes filled with concern. "We'll figure it out together, Liam. You're not alone in this." As we ate breakfast, Alex joined us, his face set in a grim expression. "Liam, we need to talk about security." "I don't trust Ava or her friends to play fair," I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and apprehension. "What did you have in mind?" Alex laid out his plans. "We'd start by reinforcing the doors and windows, installing security cameras, and setting up a monitored alarm system." But what surprised me most was his next suggestion. "I think we should head to the range today," he said. "It's been a while since you've handled a firearm, right?" I nodded. Memories of hunting trips with my dad flooding back. "Yeah, it's been years, Will." "Let's change that," Alex said firmly. "Better to be prepared and not need it than the other way around." As we drove to the shooting range, Hannah reached over and squeezed my hand. "You okay with this?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Yeah, I am. I never thought I'd be in this position. But I'm not going to let Ava or anyone else hurt me again." At the range, Alex patiently walked me through the basics again. The weight of the gun felt foreign in my hands at first, but as we practiced, muscle memory kicked in. By the end of our session, I felt more confident, more in control. Back at the house, we got to work on fortifying our defenses. I threw myself into the task, channeling my anger and fear into something productive. As we worked, I couldn't help but think about how different this was from my life just a few weeks ago. Around 2 a.m., a faint scraping sound reached my ears. I sat up, heart pounding in my chest. Was it just nerves, playing tricks on my tired mind? Or was something genuinely wrong? The sound grew louder, more distinct. A gut feeling told me this wasn't a false alarm. "Hannah," I whispered, nudging her awake. "I think they're here." She bolted upright, instantly alert. Ever since I'd moved in, Hannah had taken each precaution seriously, even insisting she sleep with a gun by her bedside. Now, she reached for it with a steady hand. "We've got this." "Liam," she reassured me, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. We crept through the dark house, every creak of the floor echoing like a gunshot. Alex, hearing the commotion, emerged from his room, shotgun in hand. He motioned for silence and led the way to the back door. That's when the door burst open, nearly off its hinges. Ava, Mark, and Claire stormed in, their faces twisted with malice. The sight of Ava sent a jolt of anger through me, but my body felt frozen. Hannah's grip on my arm reminded me I wasn't alone. Ava's voice cut through the tense air. "You think you can just hide? You think this ends here?" Mark stepped forward, emanating confidence. A cruel grin spread across his face. "We've come to finish what we started, not in this lifetime," Alex growled, raising his shotgun. Mark lunged at Alex, a knife glinting in his hand. Before I could react, Hannah aimed her pistol and fired, the shot deafening in the confined space. Mark staggered, a look of shock spreading across his face as he crumpled to the floor. Claire, eyes wild with fury, Hannah's second shot was swift, precise, catching Claire in the shoulder. She fell back, screaming in pain, clutching her wounded arm. Ava stood there, looking at the scene unfolding before her. Each second seemed to stretch into eternity. For a split moment I saw something flicker in her eyes, maybe regret or realization, before it hardened again. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "You won't get away with this," Ava hissed, taking a step back. "We were supposed to be together. You did this. You're the one who shattered everything I spat back, venom in my words. This is on you." Before Ava could react further, police burst through the doorway, guns drawn. Officers quickly subdued Ava, pushing her to the ground while others attended to Claire, securing her and applying first aid. As the chaos subsided, I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Hannah, her hands trembling now that the immediate danger had passed, wrapped her arms around me. Alex stood guard next to Mark, making sure the downed assailant posed no further threat. "You're safe now," Hannah whispered, her voice barely more than a breath against my ear. We made it. I looked around, the adrenaline slowly dissipating, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. The living room, now a crime scene, seemed utterly surreal. Mark's lifeless form, Claire groaning in pain. Ava being led away in handcuffs, an undeniable end to a nightmare that refused to let me go. But for the first time in a long while, through the haze of tragedy and loss, I saw a glimmer of hope. Hannah's fierce loyalty, Alex's unwavering support here, was the dawn after an unending night. The police officers moved methodically, cataloging evidence and taking statements. As they worked, one officer approached me, his gaze direct yet oddly compassionate. "You did everything you could," he said. "Your family saved lives tonight, family." The words sank deep, resonating in the quiet aftermath. Alex, Hannah, they weren't just friends. They were my lifeline. As we stood together, a semblance of normalcy began to return, though distant. Hannah looked at me, her eyes holding a quiet strength. "We'll get through this, Liam." Together I nodded, finally feeling the beginnings of peace. What lay ahead was uncertain. But for this moment, surrounded by true friends, I knew I wasn't alone. So much had changed, yet standing there with Hannah and Alex, I realized I still had a chance at rebuilding a life from the shattered pieces of another. With Rachel Adams' help, I pressed charges against Ava, Claire, and their corrupt law firm. The legal battle that followed turned into a high-stakes war, revealing uglier truths than I'd ever imagined. Rachel coached me through every step, her determination almost matching my own. We sat in her office one afternoon, papers spread across the desk. "Liam, this goes deeper than your case," she said, flipping through documents. "Sterling Haynes has a history of covering up misdeeds, but we need solid proof." "Proof," I echoed, leaning forward. "What kind of proof?" "Anything that exposes their criminal activities. Internal emails, financial records, testimonies from former employees. We need to dig everything up." The days turned into weeks as we gathered evidence. Rachel's team worked tirelessly, pulling late nights and early mornings, combing through a decade's worth of files. I sat through endless interviews, retelling the nightmare of my confrontation with Avia and the harassment that followed. Each recount left a sour taste in my mouth, but I held on to the hope that justice would prevail. Rachel reached out to past employees of Sterling Haynes. Many were hesitant, but once they saw the growing mound of evidence, they began to speak out. Stories of bribery, witness tampering, and blackmail emerged. Claire had played puppeteer, pulling strings to build her empire, while Ava and Mark had eagerly followed her lead. One ex-employee, Josie, provided a pivotal piece. She had been a paralegal, much like Avia, until she'd been driven out after refusing to partake in their shady dealings. "They think they're above the law," Josie said, handing over a stack of emails. Claire particularly, she kept records of everything. For leverage, in court, the battle intensified. Rachel stood unwavering, presenting evidence of the firm's corruption. She called witnesses who detailed a tangled web of deceit and criminal activity. Ava sat across from me, her face a mask of cold detachment. Claire's smugness slowly crumbled as the testimonies painted her as the architect of their schemes. Slowly, their empire began to crumble under the weight of their exposed crimes. The partners at Sterling Haynes scrambled to save what they could, but it was too late. Finally, the verdict came. Ava, Claire, and the key members of the firm were found guilty of multiple charges, from conspiracy to obstruction of justice. Sterling Haynes was disbanded, its reputation destroyed. The involved parties faced disbarment and prison time. As the gavel struck, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Liam, I told myself, you've done it. We've torn down their facade, exposed their misdeeds. Outside the courthouse, Rachel stood beside me. This isn't just your victory, Liam, she said, a rare smile on her face. It's a win for everyone they hurt. You've given them a voice. I nodded, absorbing her words. I had found justice, but more than that, I'd found a new sense of purpose. Together, we had dismantled a corrupt power structure and given hope to those they'd wronged. 3 weeks after the court case, I found myself sitting in my lawyer's office, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions and legal battles, but today marked the end of a significant chapter in my life. Congratulations, Liam, my lawyer said, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. The divorce is final. I picked up the documents, my eyes scanning the pages. It felt surreal to see my marriage to Ava officially dissolved in black and white. The woman I'd once loved, who I'd supported through thick and thin, was now nothing more than a painful memory. As we discussed, my lawyer continued, due to Ava's criminal actions, she receives nothing from the settlement. The judge was quite clear on that point. I nodded, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me, and the lawsuits my lawyer's face broke into a smile. That's where the good news comes in. The suits against Claire and Mark were successful. Given the severity of their actions and the emotional trauma you endured, the court awarded you substantial damages. He pushed another document towards me, and I felt my eyes widen as I saw the figure. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. That's not all, he added. The compensation from the law firm for their part in covering up the crimes and fostering a corrupt environment. Well, let's just say you won't have to worry about finances for a long time. I sat back in my chair, feeling overwhelmed. The money wouldn't erase the pain of what I'd been through, but it offered a chance at a new beginning, a fresh start. As I left the office, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of the divorce proceedings, the constant fear of Ava and her accomplices, the stress of the legal battles, it all seemed to lift from my shoulders. I drove to Alex and Hannah's place, where I'd been staying since that fateful night. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Hannah working in the garden. She looked up as I approached, her face breaking into a warm smile. "How'd it go?" she asked, wiping her hands on her jeans as she stood. I couldn't help but smile back. "It's done." The divorce is final. Hannah's eyes softened with understanding. She knew how much this meant to me. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around me in a comforting hug. I held her close, breathing in the scent of earth and flowers that clung to her clothes. "There's more," I said as we pulled apart. I told her about the lawsuits and the compensation. Hannah's eyes widened. "Liam, that's incredible. I mean, I know it doesn't make up for everything you've been through, but it's a new start." I finished for her. In a chance to rebuild. We headed inside, where Alex was busy in the kitchen. The smell of his famous chili filled the air. They'd offered me shelter, support, and love when I needed it most. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice slightly rough from the whiskey. "With this money, I want to start my own business. A welding and fabrication shop." Alex grinned. "Now that's an idea I can get behind. You've always been damn good with your hands." Hannah reached out and squeezed my arm. "I think it's perfect, Liam. You deserve to do something you love." As we continued to talk and plan, I felt a sense of excitement building in my chest. For the first time in a long while, I was looking forward to the future. The pain of Ava's betrayal was still there, a dull ache in my heart, but it no longer consumed me. I had a chance to redefine myself, to build something new from the ashes of my old life. And as I looked at Hannah and Alex, I knew I wouldn't be doing it alone. They were my family now, bound by something stronger than blood loyalty, trust, and love. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be challenges and setbacks, but for the first time in months, I felt ready to face them. With the legal battles behind me and a new purpose ahead, I was ready to step into this new chapter of my life. As the evening wore on and we continued to celebrate, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The divorce was final, justice had been served, and I had been given a second chance at happiness. Today was the day I'd marry Hannah, the woman who'd been my rock through the darkest times. "You clean up nice," Alex said, clapping me on the shoulder as he entered the room, ready to make an honest woman out of my sister. I chuckled, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. We decided on a small, intimate ceremony. After everything that had happened, neither Hannah nor I wanted a big fuss. Just our closest friends and family, the people who'd stood by us through thick and thin. As I walked out into the backyard of Alex's house, where we'd set up for the ceremony, I was struck by how perfect it all looked. Simple decorations adorned the trees, and a handful of chairs were arranged in neat rows. At the end of the makeshift aisle stood our officiant, an old friend of Hannah's family. I took my place at the front, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, as if on cue, the soft strains of music began to play. I turned, and there she was. Hannah walked towards me, a vision in a simple white dress that seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. Her blonde hair was adorned with small wildflowers, and her smile, God, that smile could light up the darkest night. As she reached me, I took her hands in mine. They were warm, steady, just like her presence in my life had been. We exchanged vows, promises of love and support, of partnership through whatever life might throw our way. As Hannah and I swayed gently to our first dance, I whispered in her ear, "Thank you for being my light in the darkness." She pulled back slightly, her blue eyes meeting mine. "We found each other, Liam. That's what matters." I nodded, overcome with emotion. Our love had indeed been a beacon of hope and healing. Together we'd faced the trauma of the past and come out stronger. And now, as husband and wife, we were ready to start our new life together. A month after our wedding, Hannah and I stood in front of our newly acquired workshop. The faded paint and weathered exterior couldn't dampen our spirits. This old building was about to become the headquarters of TR Welding. "It's perfect," I breathed, already envisioning where each workstation would go. Hannah pulled out her tablet, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I've got our business plan all mapped out. With your skills and my financial know-how, we're going to make this work." Over the next few weeks, we poured our hearts and souls into getting TR Welding up and running. I spent long hours setting up the equipment, fine-tuning everything to my exacting standards. Hannah worked tirelessly on the administrative side, handling paperwork, setting up our accounting systems, and reaching out to potential clients. Our first job came in sooner than we expected. A local vineyard needed custom metal trellises for their expanding fields. I threw myself into the project, relishing the feel of the welding torch in my hand again. The familiar rhythm of work helped to push away the lingering shadows of as word spread about the quality of our work, more orders started rolling in. Local businesses, homeowners, and even a few artists sought us out for custom pieces. Hannah's business savvy ensured we remained profitable, while still delivering top-notch products. One evening, as we locked up the workshop after a particularly long day, I caught Hannah staring at our sign TR Welding illuminated against the darkening sky. "What are you thinking?" I asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. Finding purpose again. With every piece I crafted, I felt like I was welding my own broken pieces back together. "We did this together," I said, kissing the top of her head. "I couldn't have done it without you," Hannah chuckled. "I couldn't have done it without your incredible talent. We make a pretty good team, Mr. Turner." As we walked to our car, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The success of our business was more than just monetary. It was proof that we could overcome anything as long as we had each other. I couldn't believe my eyes when Alex handed me the keys. "What's this?" I asked, turning the unfamiliar set over in my palm. It's from Mom and Dad, he grinned. And me. Consider it a wedding present. Hannah squeezed my arm, her eyes wide with excitement. Liam, I think. Before she could finish, Alex pulled out his phone and showed us a photo of a charming two-story house nestled among tall pines. Welcome to your new home, bro. My jaw dropped. I looked from Alex to Hannah, who was practically bouncing with joy. Are you serious? I managed to stammer. Dead serious, Alex replied. Mom and Dad wanted to do something special for you both after everything you've been through. They said it's time for a fresh start. Hannah threw her arms around Alex, hugging him tightly. Thank you. Thank you. I stood there stunned. After all the darkness of the past year, this felt like the sun breaking through storm clouds. A home of our own, a place untainted by painful memories. The next day, we drove out to see the house in person. As we pulled up the winding driveway, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The property was even more beautiful than in the photos: lush green grass, mature trees providing privacy, and a wraparound porch that seemed to invite lazy Sunday mornings. Hannah squeezed my hand as we walked up to the front door. Can you believe this is ours? She whispered. I shook my head, still in awe. It's perfect, I replied, unlocking the door and stepping inside. The interior was spacious and airy, with large windows letting in plenty of natural light. We explored each room, our excitement growing with every discovery. There was a cozy den perfect for movie nights, a kitchen that Hannah immediately started planning meals in, and upstairs, a master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom. As we stood on the back deck, overlooking the large backyard, I wrapped my arms around Hannah. This is our sanctuary, I murmured into her hair. She turned in my embrace, her blue eyes shining. Our fresh start, she agreed. A place where we can build our life together, free from the shadows of the past. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. The generosity of our family, the beauty of this place, and the promise of a future with Hannah, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. Update 1. I stood in the courtroom, my hand firmly clasped in Hannah's, as we waited for the judge to deliver the verdict. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Hannah squeezed my hand and I glanced at her, seeing relief and vindication in her eyes. The judge continued, the defendants are hereby sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder, conspiracy, and their involvement in the corrupt activities of Sterling Haynes law firm. I watched as Ava's face crumpled. As the bailiff led them away, Ava's eyes met mine for a brief moment. I saw a flicker of something regret, perhaps, before she was ushered out of the courtroom. Hannah leaned into me, her voice soft. It's over, Liam. They can't hurt us anymore, I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Yeah, it's finally over. We stayed for a while, listening as the judge detailed the extent of Sterling Haynes' corruption. The firm's fall from grace was complete, its reputation in tatters. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that their years of exploiting others had finally caught up with them. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us, shouting questions. I pulled her closer, grateful for her unwavering support. I want to focus on our future now, on building something positive out of all this. We will, Hannah assured me. We already are, with TR Welding. And now we can do it without looking over our shoulders. I smiled, thinking about our growing business. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, it had all led to this moment. To the woman sleeping peacefully beside me, and the life we were building together. I realized then that while Eva and Claire's actions had nearly destroyed me, they had also led me to something beautiful, to Hannah, to a new purpose, to a strength I never knew I possessed. Update 2. I stood on the porch of our new home, watching the sun dip below the tree line. Hannah's warm presence beside me filled me with a sense of peace I never thought I'd feel again. The gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant sound of children playing. You ready for the neighborhood barbecue tomorrow?